Will Donald Trump's presidential win shield him from prosecution? In depth, look at the legal battles ahead. With this presidential election, Donald Trump was also playing his personal destiny. Prosecuted in 4 criminal cases in the United States, his victory declared on Wednesday, November 6th, risks putting a stop to these prosecutions. The most pressing case is the one for which he was found guilty in May. The Republican was convicted on May 30th for 34 offenses of falsifying accounting documents intended to hide a payment of $130,000 to porn actress Stormy Daniels to avoid a sex scandal at the end of his 2016 presidential campaign. Donald Trump thus became the first former president of the United States to have been found guilty in criminal court. But his sentencing, already postponed until the end of November, risks being postponed again because of his victory, according to American media. Trump faces up to 4 years in prison in the case, but Cornell Law School professor Michael Dorf told Business Insider that it was likely that if Trump won the White House, he would immediately request a postponement of his sentencing until the end of his presidency. And even without a postponement, the possibility that Judge Juan Merchan would impose a prison sentence on him, as this is his first criminal conviction, now seems highly unlikely given the insurmountable practical difficulties of incarcerating a president-elect and then a sitting president, experts say. Trump also faces 2 federal charges. He was charged in 2023 with conspiracy against the American state, obstruction of an official process, and violation of electoral rights in connection with the events that occurred following the 2020 presidential election and culminated in the storming of the Capitol on January 6, 2021. The former Republican president is accused, among other things, of having wanted to invalidate the election of Joe Biden in 2020 and of having allowed the rioters who attacked Congress to do so. Donald Trump is also accused, in a separate case, of having taken White House documents to his Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida when he was no longer president. These confidential documents should normally be returned to the National Archives. He is accused of having thus endangered the security of the United States. But according to ABC and NBC, the Justice Department's long-standing policy is not to prosecute a sitting president, meaning that federal prosecutions against Donald Trump could be halted immediately. Legally, that policy should not apply to a criminal case that was already in progress before he took office, since that's a very different situation, Claire Finkelstein, a law professor at the University of Pennsylvania, told AFP. But since that's the interpretation that will prevail under a Trump administration in these federal proceedings, as it stands now, he could only be tried after he leaves office, she added. The Republican also said he would fire Jack Smith, the special prosecutor in charge of investigating both cases, in 2 seconds if he were elected president. And even if he were convicted at the end of these trials, he would have the possibility of granting himself a presidential pardon, which has never happened before in the United States. However, he cannot do so in the case of the payments to Stormy Daniels, since it is a case judged at the state level in New York, and the presidential pardon only applies to federal cases. Donald Trump has been charged in a 4th case in the state of Georgia. The Republican billionaire faces a total of 13 counts of attempted electoral fraud in this state, won by a narrow margin by Joe Biden in 2020. The prosecutor in charge of the case used a law in force in this state on organized crime, used in particular against gangs and providing for sentences of 5 to 20 years in prison. Despite the incumbent president's defeat in Georgia in 2020, Trump and the other defendants refused to acknowledge that he had lost and knowingly and willfully participated in a conspiracy to illegally change the outcome of the election in his favor, according to the indictment. Again, the Washington Post claims that a possible trial will likely not take place before he leaves the White House. According to NBC, his lawyer, Steve Sado, had warned the judge that under the Supremacy Clause and his duties as President of the United States, this trial would not take place before the end of his term, so as not to interfere.